Hi, Meg. Welcome to the Empower Nutrition Podcast.
Hi, Erin. So good to see you.
You too. I've so been looking forward to this.
Me too. I love all things bitters and gut health, as I know you do too. So I'm excited to dive in.
Yes. Yeah. So for people that I think most people maybe wouldn't know, we've actually been colleagues for years, and just collaborating with each other through the SIBO Academy, which is a group of dietitians, mostly, but overall nutrition professionals that are just really focused on gut health. So I just admire you a lot, and I can't wait to really dig deeper on the topic of bitters with you.
Well, ditto on the admiration, Erin, and I feel like I'm an OG of your SIBO.
You are the OG.
One of the originals who's been there.
Yeah.
I just value you guys and your expertise. So little plug for your program and the GI Dietitians Roadmap. It is creme de la creme.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to hear about what you've been up to. So maybe tell me a little bit about backstory. I mean, start wherever you like, but obviously, so you're a dietitian. How did you end up focusing in GI? Maybe a little bit of that, and then maybe get into a little bit about you had your private practice for many years in GI, but then why now launch a bitters company?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2013. And so that I feel like was sort of the big moment that I remember that kind of spearheaded me down this journey. I was always kind of interested in health, but my version of health in college was having Annie's mac and cheese before going out to the bar with a little spinach in it and being like, wow, I'm healthy. So I was diagnosed with celiac. As I feel like a lot of my clients resonate in the autoimmune camp, I was sort of given this very clear, cut and dry answer after my colonoscopy of you're celiac, here's a gluten-free menu. This is a list of foods that have gluten. Don't eat those and good luck. You're going to magically get better. And that just wasn't really my story. That really wasn't what happened for me. Things tended to spiral downward thereafter, mainly because of now what I know is a lot of the emotional and psychological components of a diagnosis like that and the way that it affected the stories I was telling myself about my life and how it was going to affect friendship and dating and vacations and my future. And really that manifested as more chronic illness kind of physically in my body, just kind of spiraling in that way. And also that with autoimmune, as you know, there really isn't, even with celiac, always just one path that gets somebody quote unquote better. I really needed to look into the holistic realm and pursue things like mind-body connection, and it naturally kind of put me down the path of yoga and breath work. And so I was originally 15 years ago, a yogi that was very doing it for athletic reasons. But as I got more deeply connected to my body with celiac, I actually worked with a functional provider who did some acupuncture on me. And he was the one to identify oh my gosh, you are almost completely stagnant in your low belly region. There's just no movement happening there and you are not properly breathing. And for me to hear that and not have the expertise I have now, I was very what do you mean?
I do yoga.
Yeah, I was so sassy. And that then kind of spurred this curiosity around okay, maybe I'm not breathing correctly. And there are different ways to breathe more mindfully and intentionally. And so through my yoga teacher training, I ended up going deeper with breath work training as well as meditation training. And so coming to just sort of acknowledge this broader approach to gut health that goes beyond just the foods we're eating. And for me now, 10 years or so in practice with clients, a huge root cause that I found with clients who have things like SIBO and overgrowth, stuff that you and I both work with all the time, so many of those struggles are rooted in digestive insufficiency or just problems up the chain where we're not properly breaking down and absorbing our food. And for me, mindfulness practices as well as bitters are really a beautiful combo to optimize those processes. And for me with celiac, bitters were my dirty little secret for so many years. I was using, I think my friends remember me bringing bitters to the bar, to restaurants. I was just always
That's amazing.
in my mouth in my 20s because they were so helpful for bloating, and just I felt like food sat a little bit better. And of course, it didn't allow me to eat gluten, but still I was dealing with chronic bloating and overgrowth for so long that bitters was just always a saving grace, especially for things like travel. And so it very naturally for me, just my interest in bitters grew. And my current partner is a total tinker of all things. And so when he and I started dating, I was not drinking very much at that time. I was definitely what you would call sober curious, mainly because my gut health and my autoimmune kind of stopped me from being the heavy drinker I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And so I had to really look at that relationship with alcohol and create more intentionality around it. And what I found was I am just a very social girly, and I like to be out and about and drinking with people, but I wanted to still have that component without the alcohol. And so bitters added to a drink or added to bubbly water just felt like a fun moment where I still could be like part of the experience and not feeling kind of like left out or less cool, etc. And also gave back to my body. Like it just felt like, oh gosh, I'm having something that's giving back to me, versus every time I drink, I feel like it's kind of stripping away from me, whether it's from a psychological standpoint or from a physical standpoint. So very naturally, I wanted to launch a digestive bitters that was certified gluten-free, because I actually didn't know of one, and still don't know of one that is actually third-party testing for measurable gluten to the capacity that we are. So I just wanted something that was like super safe for celiacs, but also incredibly well-sourced, quality ingredients, and tastes good for even the person who's like, I'm kind of new to bitters and I don't know how I feel about this, like, you know, bitter taste.
Yes, so good. And I mean, supplements are such a challenging space for trying to be like strict gluten free. And I find the same that like bitters tend to be even like harder among supplements. I'm not sure what the reason for that is, but like, yeah, I'm sure people are just so celebrating that that it's like an actual gluten free bitter.
Yeah, you know, with the testing, so I knew I wanted to get something so vetted to the point where it was less than 5 parts per million, so below the FDA standard of 20 parts per million. So we actually use the testing lab that Trisha Thompson uses. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's known as gluten-free watchdog. So she's been like the OG of testing products and vetting them for being gluten-free. So we use the lab that she recommends up in Vermont.
Nice.
Yeah.
Maybe tell people a little bit about like what happens with bitters. Like what do they do?
Yeah. They're just such a big win for the vast majority. And we can also talk about like who is definitely not a good fit for bitters, because I don't like to be that person that's like, just everybody take it and it's just great for everyone. It is quite beneficial to the vast majority, because it really upregulates and enhances digestive secretions. So if people aren't familiar with bitters, they're basically an infusion of bitter herbs and plants, just simple. But most people are most familiar with like Angostura bitters that are in like a cocktail or on like a bar back. And the funny thing about Angostura is that they have one, like in their original flavor, one actual bitter herb, gentian root. Everything else is filler, caramel color, added sugars, flavors. We don't do that. I wanted something that was truly an herbal blend of all bitter herbs. And mainly my favorite thing about them is that they increase those digestive secretions, meaning they're knocking on the door of stomach acid, bile flow, saliva output, pancreatic enzymes, even things like insulin, to just enhance your own pool or your own capacity. So I love that they're not replacing anything, as I know like you feel jazzed about that when we don't have to give people like supplements that replace something digestively. They're just like enhancing the system. In addition, blood sugar support as well. So there's a number of studies to show that bitters support blood sugar. But what I'll say anecdotally that's really fun is I do have a functional medicine friend who's been using a CGM in congruence with our digestive bitters. And she kind of like went deeper down a metabolic journey earlier this year. And so she started tracking without the bitters and then started tracking with the bitters. Specifically using JÜJ, and has noticed that her postprandial glucose is much more balanced, comes down quicker with meals that she has JÜJ before. So really just kind of fascinating. It's obviously like a N=1 situation. We're not doing any studies actively right now, but I thought that was like cool and fun evidence to think about. I also, for me with celiac, like the huge thing that I love about bitters is it's so enhancing of motility. Like it just tends to help the person who is prone to constipation, prone to feeling bound up, enhances kind of the movement of the cleaning wave of the gut and keeping things moving along. So I love it for just like daily healthy pooping. And then, you know, we also, especially with the lemon flavor, which is richest in liver supportive herbs, there is a liver benefit really via the bile flow and the enhanced bile flow capacity that comes with having digestive bitters. And then also just kind of interesting evidence as well towards reduced sugar cravings. What the studies have shown is that that bitter basically inhibits a sweet responsive neuron in the brain. So just kind of fascinating for people who tend to struggle or like, again, kind of in that blood sugar camp or sugar cravings. And then I would say like the general acid reflux person, we want to be mindful of somebody who's like has severe gastritis or hiatal hernia or, you know, ulcers in the stomach, but general person who struggles with acid reflux, probably secondary to sluggish motility, it can be a great remedy for that person. And then I would just say like overall big bucket, people prone to more bloating and gas, great for those people.
Oh my gosh, so good. Yeah, I love how you point out that it works on so many different mechanisms. It's not like you just bile, because if it was just bile, that opens up a lot of questions around like, well, why not just take bile salts? Or, you know, is it only if you don't have, you know, if you've had a cholecystectomy, is that like the situation? But it's like what you're talking about is like it's stimulating the overall digestive symptoms. So enzymes, bile, insulin secretion, gastric motility through the migrating motor complex, like that bitter taste, like stimulates like a lot of different processes.
And I'll just say too, from a joy making standpoint, the reason I named it JÜJ is I've said for years, like, I just don't want water when I'm socially drinking. I want to JÜJ it up. I want to make it a little more fun. So it just makes your drink better. It adds that little fun component. We really encourage people mixing and matching the flavors, using fresh squeezed juices, using fresh herbs. Like it's meant to be this nice botanical add-in that actually on its own with bubbly water almost has the taste of like an alcoholic cocktail because it's really quite botanical and herbal. It is not sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have some on my desk. So
Yay!
And they are amazing. And like there are some, you know, little idea of how to take it here, but so like, but tell me your hacks. Like what is like the top way you recommend doing this? Like this says like take a deep breath, put some directly on your tongue with a meal, or put it in your drink and just enjoy it. So like, what would you say is like the optimal way to do this? Like before you eat or when you're eating or anytime in water, straight into your mouth? Like, what do you think?
As a general rule of thumb, I think I'm sure you resonate with this. I'm a big fan of just people taking things versus always having to get it perfect because I find that a lot of clients forget stuff.
Right.
However, for the person who's like, I want to optimize digestive secretions, I want to optimize blood sugar balance before meals would be my recommendation. So we're really like knocking on that door of digestive secretion output and enhancement. And it depends on the person. I mean, for clients, when I'm dosing them more therapeutically, I will use it directly on the tongue before meals or just in a little bit of water with them. I also really like just having it in a little bit of warm lemon water in the morning, especially the lemon flavor to kind of set up gastric motility for the day, especially for people struggling with having a morning bowel movement and kind of needing to sort of set the stage. But I do have people who tell me all the time they like having it as an after dinner digestif. I don't think that's wrong because you're still kind of supporting the cleaning wave of the gut, gastric motility. So you can't really mess it up. My recommendation is just like with anything, take it slow. There's no rushing this race. If you're brand new to bitters, just start with a few drops either on the tongue or in a mocktail. I personally, Alex and I, my partner, who's my co-founder, we love to have like a mocktail end of day, especially since we both work from home as sort of like an artificial commute while we're cooking dinner, just like get those digestive juices going for dinner after like potentially sitting a lot of the day, and have something that just like feels enjoyable kind of as our brain phase is getting going with smelling the food we're cooking.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, I mean, you were like, I feel like there's just been a whole moment with like non-alcoholic, like mocktail, kind of like adaptogenic drinks. But I feel like you were there before it was like such a big thing. But
Well,
yeah,
that's sweet,
it's
Erin.
really,
I feel like, I mean, we're still so new. We launched at the end of last year, so we are still a baby company, but it's fun to be in this world where a lot of people I think are getting sober curious or
mhm.
taking a break on alcohol.
Yeah, because it's just such an issue for so many people, and I think I'm glad you brought that up. I took a whole year off last year, like all of 2023, and it was just really incredible to feel like to go from like having like where it was like constantly kind of a struggle to like avoid having a glass of wine or whatever to just like I wouldn't even think about it. So that was like so freeing. But then I'm curious what you think about like full sobriety versus like just low alcohol. Cause I was like, great, I've got free from like all these cravings I was having and I feel like totally
Mhm.
free from it. And so then like in the new year, I was like, okay, great. I'll just have like a glass of wine now and then. I
Yeah.
went straight back to like hard to hold myself back from drinking a glass of wine every night. So I'm like, ugh, like immediately, it like took like no time. I think it might be partly I think there's a lot to it, but, like, I do find that, like, over that year that I took off, I had, like, started to like, create this whole collection of all these, like, adaptogenic, like, mocktail drinks and things. I find that, like, if I do have that, that's kind of, like, scratches the itch a lot of times. I think it's not always the alcohol. It's like we're just looking for a way to, like, chill out, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I think that's an important, I love what you said there. And I think it's really relatable in the sense that I am a big fan of having options. You don't want your option to be the glass of wine or air. You want your
Yeah.
option to be
Yeah.
something fun and that feels like a moment, that feels like an elevated experience that you get to choose in that moment instead. And I will also say, I think knowing yourself here is helpful because some of us, I think all or nothing sometimes does serve us better because some of us, it's like, if I have one cracker, I eat the whole box of crackers. Whereas for me and my personal journey, because I had to go hard and fast off of gluten for celiac, since then, I have not worked well with hard lines in the sand. It just like mucks my headspace.
Yeah.
And I have found that living in the and space in a lot of ways, in like other life ways, as well as an entrepreneur, as well as with certain foods and alcohol, has just served me in terms of like not having this hard line where it's like you can't ever have alcohol again. Because for me, in certain circumstances, it's felt really joy making to have like wine in Napa or, celebrate at a
Yeah.
wedding with a glass of champagne. For me, though, especially in like entrepreneurship, I found that even with drinking, like, say, a glass of wine every night for my particular body, it just really causes shifts in my mental state that
Yeah.
make it very hard for me to be as creative, as expanded, and hold the space and the containers for the clients that I do, especially when it comes to breath work and things like that. So for me, my relationship with it now is just one of like intention where I choose alcohol a few times a year when it's like just about me wanting it in a social setting where it just feels like
Mhm.
it's going to add to sparking the joy. Because having it as often as I used to in the past just like did not serve me physically, emotionally, mentally. And having zero of it for the rest of my life just also feels a little sad.
Yeah, same. And I like how you pointed out, like, I think a lot of people have set up in their mind that's like, oh, yeah, alcohol is like definitely a problem if you drink like 4 drinks every night or something like that. But I think what we're both talking about is like, no, like actually, like having 1 drink every night doesn't serve me. But like, I think most people kind of look at that as like fine drinking, or some people might
Yeah,
even think
like
that's like
it's,
good
oh,
for you.
I'm a big drinker. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like people define that as problem drinking, but, like, I think definitely for me and for a lot of my clients, it actually is.
Yeah, yeah. I think any of us in the gut health camp just know
Yeah.
how much alcohol doesn't tend to help healing. And so
Mhm.
I also think though, joy making does help healing. So I
Right.
think there's ability to find the balance with
Yeah,
intentionality.
exactly. Yeah, and, like, things like this really help because I find that, like, oh, yeah, if I, like, get off work and I am, like, tempted to pour myself a glass of wine or whatever, I, like, think to my little mocktail collection and have it, and, like, it's like, "Oh, actually, that kinda hit the spot." So it's, like, wonderful how you've created this. So it's just like another way to have that like moment that you're talking about in a way that probably serves people a lot better.
Yeah, and there are fun ways to get creative with it. Like I'm definitely somebody, we like to get our hands dirty in the kitchen. So I'll just say you can put it in warm beverages too. I actually really like the lemon or the orange in like a turmeric golden milk latte at night,
Fun.
or in a cup of tea. Like the lemon goes well in a cup of tea. And then I've also experimented with putting it in salad dressing. So the lemon is great in a
Oh,
like lemon tahini salad dressing because it just adds that extra bitter hit. So why not kind of, get those digestive secretions going. And I've done the orange in like a homemade frosting too for like a light citrus flavor too.
very cool.
Fun to
Do you have on your JÜJ website, do you have recipes or do you send them out on email?
We do. So on livewithjudge.com, we have a bunch of mocktail recipes. Everything is generally just like low to no, there's no added sugars. There's low sweetener recipes on there in terms of like things like honey. But I'm a big fan of also in this camp of mocktails, I've found in the non-alcoholic spirits camp, there's been a lot of like what I call blood sugar bombs coming out where it's just like loaded with sugar, or the prebiotic drinks that have like all these fake sweeteners or sugar alcohols or fibers that just jack people's digestion up and make you so bloated.
Yeah.
So I also like wanted to find that balance too, where it's like, okay, we're not choosing alcohol most of the time, but also like I'm not choosing the blood sugar bomb that's making me also feel kind of wackadoo.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a disaster zone out there with these drinks.
Totally.
It's very hard to find the right ones, especially if you don't tolerate like some ingredients. Like you said, like a lot of people don't tolerate sugar alcohols or just prebiotics in general or high histamine things. It can be very tricky to find like an all-in-one drink. So it sounds like with JÜJ, you can like find a recipe and like incorporate this in something that like works for you.
Yeah. And I'll just say my favorite way to have it right now is I love to get an 100% cranberry juice from Lakewood, those like glass bottled juices, and do a splash of that, a bunch of fresh squeezed lime, a little pinch of salt, and then add whatever flavor I'm feeling because all the flavors actually go really well with that. That's kind of my go-to because I love getting that extra like polyphenol hit from the cranberry, and antioxidants, but also it's just lightly sweet. It's not like super saturated sweet, but it also a beautiful color. So it's just fun.
It sounds super fun. Like I put a little bit of crushed ice in that, maybe a little garnish and be on my way.
Exactly.
So it sounds like you definitely like listed off a lot of things that bitters are beneficial for, but maybe you can kind of frame like the perfect person for this. Like who would be like the ideal person to give it a try?
Yeah. So really this product is designed so it's definitely for all people. It's not just for women. We really wanted it to feel very gender neutral to all people. And the person who generally feels like I eat really healthy, but I feel just like that much more bloated than maybe I used to, than maybe my friends or partner, especially if you feel like you're feeling uncomfortable bloat after meals. Like, yes, of course, in certain situations, we would want to dig deeper and get at the root behind like what exactly is going on there. But if you're dealing with kind of low grade bloating where it feels like certain foods are harder to digest than others, I am a big fan of combining my rule of threes and bitters at every single meal for the vast majority, which is 3 deep breaths 3 times during the meal to just slow down and get present. And again, activate that brain phase, that cephalic phase of eating to enhance digestive secretion output along with the bitters is just a really beautiful, accessible combination for people. For me, the intention behind bitters on a greater level and launching a product as a private practice owner was really, I can't help everyone. My work isn't accessible to everyone on the planet, but I feel like through having a cookbook and having bitters, these are things where people can try them in a relatively safe way that is accessible to most people to help them feel better. So the bloated person, the acid reflux person, the person who does maybe kind of struggle with blood sugar balance a bit, or gassiness as well, or just like uncomfortable burping after meals. And I really recommend, like, anytime you're adding in something new, always check with your doctor, no matter what, to just, get the green light. But you should start low and slow with it. And if you've never had bitters before, start with it in a mocktail, because that will introduce you to it, and it kind of like the best way possible before you go to like larger doses or putting it on the tongue.
Okay. Yeah. So good. I've even just like chaos of work sometimes. So I've even just like had some water and like just plop in some water and kind of
Totally.
drink it. It's like you don't have to
Do
get too
that.
fancy with it. I'm like, one way this is happening is like in this water. Here we go.
Totally. And we get the question often, like, can I have too much JÜJ? I'm obsessed with JÜJ. Do I have too much? I always recommend like listen to your body if you can. Now, not everybody's as in tune with their body, so sometimes that recommendation is a little tricky. But generally, if you're dosing anywhere from 2 mLs to 3 mLs and you're having that before each meal, I would end cap you there. Like we kind of have an upper limit that we list on our website where especially if someone's noticing like it's feeling really good when I have it before each meal, but if I go higher than that, it's not feeling good. Just like be natural with it. You wouldn't drink the whole bottle in one sitting. Like that is a lot of bitter herbs.
Everything has a bell curve.
Everything does. Like it just that's the case with there can be too much of a good thing.
For sure. What would you say, like, let's say JÜJ is like really helping somebody with, let's say, bloating and maybe some flatulence after they eat. What would you recommend they do about that? Is it okay, just take bitters like the end, or does that kind of like mean something that they need to like take a look at? Like, what do you think?
I feel like it depends on the person. I mean, I would want to know how severe those symptoms are and how much better the symptoms are with JÜJ. I personally, I'm sure you feel this way. Like if able, I always like to get testing on people. I always like to dig in a little deeper as to see like what is going on digestively. And then also just knowing the context of the person. Like if someone has autoimmune, like I do, they may need a little bit more than digestive bitters long-term to really support robust digestion and absorption. Whereas if someone's noticing a significant change and they don't have a lot of other risks or medical conditions going on, they may be fine with just doing long-term digestive bitters and eating bitter foods with most of their meals and kind of hanging out there along with some of the mindfulness practices. So I guess it depends. I'm curious if you have any thoughts though.
Yeah, I agree. I think there could be multiple like root causes of the issue, but like, yeah, if you're dependent on bitters to get through life comfortably, there's a deeper thing to probably work on, and probably good to work with somebody that's a professional in that space to help you figure out what's going on. I mean, I guess, and then like maybe a related question is, if people respond well to bitters, then does that mean they should take digestive enzymes or take a prokinetic or a probiotic? Or is it like, no, you should just like not really layer any of those things with bitters?
I'm a big fan of layering, definitely when it's warranted. So again, I just think my answer isn't fun. It depends.
Yeah.
Because if I'm seeing on someone's testing that they have just a lot of digestive insufficiency along with really low commensal bacteria, then I am going to consider like, wow, we really need to rebuild. And with that rebuilding with probiotic foods, prebiotic sources, polyphenol foods, like with that rebuilding, they may end up having more robust digestive secretion and just overall like so much of our gut intermingles and affects each other. So I find that a lot of times healing one component can kind of have a domino effect on supporting the other. And I just think, anytime people have robust overgrowth going on in the gut, even if bitters is helping, there still is that like elephant in the room where I think they're just, they're going to digest and absorb so much better once we work on that component, as well as, again, like autoimmune, I do find tend towards sluggish motility, tend towards issues with the MMC, especially if we're layering in like food poisoning, episodes, which is like something in my history. And so that person just may need more support than just bitters alone, where we are really targeting that cleaning wave of the gut.
Yeah. How often do you start with, like, let's say you have a client that you're working with one-on-one and they've got digestive problems, like what we're talking about. Do you ever just start with like just bitters and then, like you said, maybe some like breathing exercises?
Totally. Definitely. Like almost across the board. While I'm waiting on testing, if people are having uncomfortable symptoms, and they don't have any risk factors like gallstones or kidney stones or hiatal hernia and ulcers, then I feel comfortable starting them on bitters, just like kind of as a broad spectrum, start at a low dose, see how they feel at meals. I just haven't had anyone have a bad reaction to bitters yet in practice, which is awesome and hard to say about a lot of things. So my foundational work with clients is always starting to look at like, how are they eating? What is the mealtime hygiene looking like? How do we incorporate breath work? And that also looks at like, how do we have mindful meals versus grazing all day long? And then layering in bitters and bitter foods. And sometimes I'll start with bitter foods and then layer in digestive bitters. It just depends on the client and their symptoms.
Tell me more about that. What are some of the foods you would do and how would you have them do it?
Yeah. This is always fun because I find so I have like a whole handout about this, but when I pull up this handout, usually most clients are like, what? Like, I don't think I've even ever had radicchio. I've had endive maybe once in a random at a restaurant.
Fancy restaurant.
And I've had dried cranberries coated in sugar, but that's about it. So I do love talking about bitter foods because they're just less common in the food supply. So, even things like radish or broccoli rabe, and I feel like dandelion greens is like the king of the bitter foods.
Yeah.
And just looking at like, how do we get, even if you're eating really none of those with intention, can we intentionally get one serving of those in a day? And then maybe we move to more than that. I'm a big fan on coaching clients in that capacity because a little bit goes a long way. Like even something like a handful of broccoli sprouts can just have a powerful outcome from the bitter standpoint, as well as just like sulforaphane, detox, etc. And I find just sometimes with foods alone, depending on the client, they'll notice a difference with that just because they're used to the sweet, salty, carby foods and not putting the intention around the bitter. That just tends to light up those receptors in the GI tract.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's like just kind of like missing from the American like diet almost completely. And it can be, food is medicine, like what we say. So like it's probably the natural way of doing this, but of course people are so out of balance that, it's great to start with like the food first thing, but yeah, for a lot of people, just taking bitters is more convenient. It's also maybe a little bit more potent. That might be like the level where they need it.
Yeah. And I'll just give an example because I think examples are always really helpful of where someone could try just like intentionally incorporating more bitter foods. So for example, if someone's having eggs or toast in the morning, sprinkling fresh dill on either of those is a great way. That's actually a bitter food. So just a small amount of that sprinkled in. You could have something like broccoli sprouts, like I mentioned, or radish, like with a hummus or a salad at lunch. And then at dinner, say you're having a pasta, wilting in broccoli rabe or a dark leafy green like dandelion greens or kale into that meal. Again, just like eating things that like are maybe classically what people are already eating, but like, how do we just add? I'm a big fan of abundance mindset. Let's add things.
Oh, same. Yeah. I know. It's like, what? You're not going to take a bunch of my favorite foods away from me? Like, what are we even doing?
The common misconception with dietitians or people in that place who's given us a bad name. But yeah, I think we all come from that place, especially with GI, where we're like, we want to get people on the most expanded diet possible versus the most restricted.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime you can add more, always good.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, tell people a little bit about how they can find out more about JÜJ and like, where do they get it and how does that all work?
Yeah, so JÜJ we are at livewithjuj.com. So it's just livewithjuj.com. And then we are at JÜJ Bitters on Instagram. So JÜJ Bitters on Instagram. You can find us there. We also have an affiliate program for dietitians and people that are health practitioners who want to recommend something regularly to their clients that they feel good about, that they know is third-party tested for gluten, as well as contaminants like mycotoxins, pesticides. So we'd love to connect with anybody who's interested in that, especially if you don't like ask us any questions before. And yeah, that's us.
That's amazing. And it's so cool that people can just like actually ask you questions.
Oh yeah, we are a small business of 2. So it is us.
I keep thinking about that when I see your emails because they look so good.
Wow, Erin, that is so thoughtful. I feel like that is a place where I'm a small fry, but thank you.
It doesn't look small fry. I'm like, okay, great. Like these emails are looking incredible. So good job.
Well, I will say we worked with an incredible branding person who also did my other company's website, and she did JÜJ website. And she's incredible. So she's helped us with
Yay.
a lot of the logos and branding, and we all need that as business owners.
Absolutely. Totally. I feel like a lot of people don't build out email templates with like a branding person, but it's
Yeah.
genius.
Yes.
Awesome. And then maybe just, I know we didn't talk about it too much, but obviously you do work with people one-on-one. Maybe you can tell people a little overview of like how you work with people. What are your, like, what's your ideal client of who you can be the most helpful for and how they can learn more about that?
Yeah, so my practice is called Grounded Nourishment. I launched it in 2020. It's a virtual practice. I typically work with women in their 20s to 50s who have been struggling with frustrating chronic digestive issues where they have not gotten answers from typical conventional doctors. And especially if they kind of know that they are stressed, but don't really know what to do about it. My secret sauce is kind of melding the art with the science and bringing in the mindfulness components and the breathwork components. That is a very big piece to my work because we want to really create an environment where the body recognizes that it's safe and can open to the more physical healing work, like the supplements and the food changes. So I love that work. I'm so blessed to do it. And I work with women one-on-one, and then I have a membership for people who have already worked with me who want to stay with me longer. And we bring in things like guest speakers and do group sessions. So they can find me at Grounded Nourish there. I tend to give lots of fun little tidbits and tips and recipes on Instagram. And I have a weekly newsletter that's completely free. If you're just somebody who's like, I want to learn more about gut and mindfulness and stress management, definitely you can subscribe.
Amazing. Thank you. And we'll definitely link that in the show notes for people to just so you can just click on over there.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Meg. This was so fun. I'm very inspired about bitters. I already was, but you like even further helped educate me a little bit more and give me some more tips of like ways to incorporate it and why. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So grateful to you.
Same. We'll talk to you soon. Okay. Take care.
Bye.